Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and today is May 5th of 2024, and we're celebrating the 6th Sunday of Easter. Now, today's Gospel comes to us from the Gospel according to John, chapter 15, verses 9 through 17. Jesus said to his disciples, "As the Father loves me, so I also love you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy might be complete. This is my commandment. Love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends, because I have told you everything I have heard from my Father. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you, and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. This I command you, love one another." As we continue our way through the Easter season, today's Gospel is also taken from the Last Supper discourse. And both at the beginning and at the end of the passage, Christ tells his disciples that his commandment, the one thing they must do, is love one another. Now, there's three passages here that warrant some closer consideration, and that we can apply to our own lives. First, the words, "If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love." Second, the words, "No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." And thirdly, the phrase, "I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends." So again, the 3 points: keeping the commandments, the greatest love, and that reference to slaves and friends. Now, regarding the first, Christ tells us that it's only by keeping his commandments that we can remain in his love. There can be no doubt in our minds that God the Father and Jesus love us, and that they love us very dearly. "As the Father loves me, so I also love you." Think, that's a love that never changes. It's an eternal love that has called us into being out of nothingness and desires to see us in heaven forever with the Trinity. However, on our part, we can choose not to remain in this love. And we do that by not following the commandments. Now, Christ's words help us to avoid two erroneous extremes. First, there are many people today who are not convinced that God loves them and wants them to be in heaven. It could be because of their sins, or their poor decisions, or because of some suffering they've had to endure. But no matter what it is, no matter how terrible it was, God still loves. And even though it's difficult to see how, we know that that love never changes, even during challenges. The other erroneous extreme is to say that God is so loving that it doesn't matter what we do. But this clearly contradicts what Christ says in the Gospel. It's true that God loves us no matter what. And if we truly love him, then we will return that love in the way he asks. Sometimes people will say, well, what does it matter what people do as long as they're in love? Well, it matters a lot. Because Christ tells us clearly the way he wants to be loved. For instance, a man who buys his wife roses. Well, that seems nice, but if he knows that she's allergic to them, that she hates them, and she tells him specifically not to go and buy roses, well, his buying roses isn't being thoughtful or loving. In fact, he's doing the opposite. Likewise, it's true that Christ loves us no matter what, but our response to that love means that we must in turn love him in the way he asks, which is by following the commandments. Now, regarding the second point, it's really hard to capture the beauty and power of Christ's words when he says, "No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, there's two subtle details that get passed over in this English translation, right? First, stuck in between the phrase, no one has greater love than this, and the other phrase, to lay down one's life for one's friends, the Greek original has a tiny conjunction, hina, which connects them, but here it doesn't get translated. It's because it's difficult to translate, but because it means the intent, or the ordering, or the reason for something, the why behind it. So if we tried to translate it, the phrase would be something like this: no one has greater love than this love, which was from the beginning, as it was originally conceived by God, meant and designed to reach even to the extreme of sacrificing one's life. That means that God's plan, his design, was that the greatest love of all would be sacrificial. And not just sacrificing little things here or there, but sacrificing what really matters, what's most precious. And we know this, secondly, from the order of the Greek words, right? Which throws the emphasis on life. The love is proven because of how unique and unrepeatable the thing sacrificed is. Now, money can belong to anyone. Material goods are free for the taking, but someone's life is the most precious and personal thing they have. Such was the love with which God loved us from all eternity. And such is the love that we are called to have with our brothers and sisters, or with our spouses, or with our children. The measure of this love is the measure of our love for God. Since, as St. John tells us in his first letter, whoever does not love a brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. If we're really willing to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters or families, then we'll also be able to lay them down for God. However, the opposite is also true. If in our daily lives, we can't fool ourselves into thinking that we'll do great things for God, or that we'll be able to give our lives to him in great challenges and difficult moments, if here and now, I can't even sacrifice the smallest things, especially my time and things that require charity towards my family. And yet, that's the love we're called to practice. Now, thirdly, Christ tells his disciples that he doesn't call them slaves, but friends. Now, maybe for us this is not surprising, but this would have been extremely surprising to his listeners, since the term doulos, or slave or servant of God, didn't have a negative meaning in biblical times. In fact, great men like Moses, Joshua, and David were all called slaves of God. The greatest men in the past had been proud to call themselves slaves of God. But Christ offers an intimacy with God that not even the greatest men knew before he came into the world. The term friends of God, also has a context. Abraham was called the friend of God. But there was also a custom, a tradition, that the Roman emperors and Eastern kings would have a very select group of men called the friends of the king. At all times they had access to the king. They even had the right to come into his bedchamber at the beginning of the day. The king talked to these friends before he talked to his generals, his rulers, and his statesmen. The friends of the king were those who had the closest and most intimate connection with him. As Catholics, Christ calls us to be his friends, to be the ones closest to him. We can forget this, but we shouldn't. We're the ones who have access to him day and night to ask for his grace and help. We can ask ourselves, do we think of ourselves as Christ's friends? Do we realize that our friendship means sacrifice and dying to ourselves? So today, through the intercession of Mary, the Mother of God, let's ask for the grace to lay down our lives for love of Christ, and so be truly worthy of the name friend.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed hearing the gospel and homily, I invite you to share it with someone you know who may also find it rewarding, and also to subscribe to the Catholic Voice channel. Please see in the description below if you would like to receive a text message for each daily gospel and homily. Please also keep our missionary priests throughout the world in your prayers. Thank you, and God bless.